Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Data Center Exchange. Now, when I started this podcast, I really wanted to shine a light on the data center world and just give people an insight into the industry as a whole. So that meant discussing some of the challenges that the industry faces, but crucially, providing a bit of a platform to showcase the positive impact the industry has on people, the communities, and the way that we live. And today is all about that positive impact the industry has. So I think it's more important than ever now for the industry to be mindful on the impact on society, the impact on the environment, and how sustainable their developments, products, and services are. And I guess you could always argue that as an industry and as individuals and as organizations, we can all do more to make more of an impact. But it's evident now that there's so much great work happening. So to shine a light on that, I wanted to explore and lift the lid on what are the most widely respected businesses out there are doing within their business and out in their communities. So to do just that, I wanted to welcome Michillay Brown from Stack Infrastructure onto the Data Center Exchange. Michillay, welcome to the Data Center Exchange.
Thank you so much, Dal. I'm really excited to actually be here today and the opportunity to speak about what Stack is doing from an ESG and social impact perspective. So really happy to be here, Dal. Thank you.
No, excellent. Thank you very much for coming. But before we dive into the main topic about the impact on ESG that Stack are having, I just want to focus on you yourself and just understand your background before you entered the data center industry, essentially.
Perfect. I will dive right in. I've got quite an interesting journey that happened before the data center industry. But just to start off, I'm actually originally from South Africa. And really my educational background was in environmental science as well as social sciences in South Africa in one of the universities there. And that is really where my sustainability journey began, was with my background and my foundational studies. In my earlier years, I worked for several environmental and social impact non-for-profit organizations. So that's really me getting my exposure to how things work on the ground with that lens. But then I also transitioned into the private sector. So I worked for one of the largest auditing firms in their sustainability and climate change department. And then I took a further interest from there, which was an interest in the mining and metals industry. Now, one of the key things there was I was very curious about understanding the impacts of the mining metals industry and how we can transition from the narrative of what the impact is versus what they are positively doing in that industry. And people don't realize, just like the data center industry, that the mining and metals industry is crucial for everything that we do. Everything that we use on a daily basis is either mined or grown. And I don't think general community consensus understand that and placing the connection between the two. But I think my key thing was, how do we do this sustainably, responsibly, and how do we get that message out to the relevant stakeholders? So that's really where I started in the industry. I've had various roles across the mining and metals industry before moving into data centers. So from looking at human rights, to our environmental impact from a climate change perspective, and then also looking at technology. So I joined a business unit within that industry that looked at blockchain technology to trace diamonds from the time they come out of the ground all the way to the end consumer. And that really spoke to ethical sourcing. Consumers, even today, are very interested in knowing where do their products come from. And that was one of the key focuses there. I also transitioned into looking at hydrogen energy. So hydrogen fuel cells is a cleaner alternative to diesel, and how to market hydrogen to the rest of the world. So for the mining industry, that was for big mining trucks, but then there was an element of my role that was looking at smaller vehicles and changing and influencing government policy to adopt hydrogen energy solutions. So that was my last role before moving into the data centers industry. Now, I spent a lot of time in the mining industry, so almost 10 years. I was looking for a change. I was also looking for something new and different, and then came across Stack. And Stack is a fantastic organization, but I was attracted by the role itself. It was brand new. ESG had been implemented at a local level, but there was no ESG strategy. or roadmap or plan. And that's where I was very attracted to shaping that area for Stack and joining the data center industry. But I'm not going to say to you that I knew anything about data centers before I saw the role. So I knew nothing about the data center industry. I got myself up to speed. And now I find myself regularly in conversation with my mother trying to explain what a data center is, which is a long journey, but here we are.
No, it is. And yeah, so very interesting background from some really interesting industries there, and also interesting and what is the norm in my experience of, you know, people coming into this industry and not really knowing what it is. I think that's part of the challenge of the industry, to help educate, you know, people that just don't necessarily know what a data center does and the impact that it has. So yeah. And so Vice President now of ESG at Stack, can you just give us a bit of an insight into what your role entails specific to Stack now?
Perfect. So just for those who don't know, ESG, environment, social, and governance, because we can't assume that people know what all these acronyms mean. But effectively, I lead our strategy and implementation within EMEA. I also lead our global strategy on social impact. On the environment side, we have a global lead in the US, and really our model is around global collaboration, local implementation. So I lead the social impact strategy globally, and that looks at our community engagement, diversity, equity, and inclusion awareness and implementation, and then also our education strategy. So how are we tapping into diverse talent pools and building the talent and skills we need for the future? So that really is at a broad level what I am involved in.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for that overview. To try and dive into the main topic now, and just to get a bit of an insight into what you guys are up to at Stack on the ESG front. You've obviously worked across a number of industries, as you've explained there in the past, including mining, tech, and now obviously data centers. So from an ESG perspective, how essential is it that we take all aspects of this seriously within the data center market? For people listening, why is ESG so important?
Great, Dal. That's a very broad question,
It
but
is a broad
I
question.
can dive right into it. I think one of the key things we need to understand is no matter what industry we are in, we have an impact. We have an impact on people, we have an impact on the environment, and these are things that we're not going to be able to shy away from. So there's a couple of reasons why it is important, and I'll start with the very compliance side of things. But governments and regulations are getting stricter and stricter on what we are doing. The industry was not quite as regulated as my previous industries that I've been in, but that is increasing a lot more. So there's a lot of scrutiny on how we're operating as a business, and there will be a lot of scrutiny on how we operate going forward, as well as the legislation that's put in place around ESG. There is a broader societal concern for how industries are demonstrating positive environmental and social impact. And that's something we're seeing worldwide. If we're looking at just from a climate perspective, how much we have seen change over the years on the impacts of climate change at a local level, and people looking at businesses to say, what are you doing about these impacts? You're here, you have a presence, you are extracting or taking up space, but how are you actually involved in being part of the solution? So there is the government element, but then there is also the societal element. We are also working with people every day. We mustn't forget that. Yes, we're an industry to make money, and we're using our infrastructure to help our clients, but we are working with people on a daily basis. And I think one of the key things we need to understand is that if we don't build those relationships with the local communities we work with, we can face a lot of resistance or issues down the line. And I think the key thing here is, how are we developing those relationships before we've even developed? One of the key things I love to speak about is how Stack is effectively doing community relations on the ground. So, you know, ordinarily and historically, the data center industry is actually scrutinized for not doing community engagement well. And we're trying to improve that on a daily basis. For us, it is before you have even started constructing, developing, or designing. You go all the way to the site selection phase. And we do follow a step-by-step process in who we're engaging with, so identifying your stakeholders. whether those are the local NGOs, or they are the community members themselves, or there may be schools in the vicinity that also may be there and want to know, what is this thing that is happening? So it's important to put a face to the actual data center industry itself. We can't move away from the fact that we do extract and we do take up energy and power and everything, and water as well. So how are we educating the community on how that impacts them? And the fact that there are ways that the data center industry is also giving back to that ecosystem. A lot of people don't know that. So Dal, I've touched on a couple of points there, but I think it's quite clear that there is a direct link between what we do as a business, how we impact people, and how that is linked to sustainable development.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot on this podcast and previous episodes across all the subjects that we touch on about relationships. It's just interesting there that you know, almost at the heart of what you guys are trying to achieve in the communities and the impacts that relationships, communication is central, I guess, to the success of what you guys are doing. And have you obviously been exposed to the mining and minerals industry for I think you said just under 10 years, and other industries as well. Have you seen any sort of nuances within the data center industry in its approach to ESG? Any differences, different outlook, for example, compared to the other industries you've been involved in?
Yeah, so a couple of things on that one. I think that the challenges environmentally and socially are actually quite similar to the previous industries that I've been on, just on a different scale. So I think the data center industry, and I said this before, is a largely unknown or hidden industry. You know, beyond you and I and everyone in the data center bubble, most people don't know about the industry. And so I do think it is far less regulated and a lot less risk at the moment, but that is changing. I do see Stack being part of that change, where we actually want to bring awareness to ESG as opposed to something that is hidden and forgotten and not spoken about because of fear. I think there are so many positive things that the data center industry is doing, and there's just better ways that we need to communicate about it. I mean, one of the ways is right now what we're doing today, but I don't think we speak enough about the positive ESG implementation that the data center industry is doing. And that is something that over time, as we grow as a sector, as we grow sort of more familiar to people, that is going to be widely communicated.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I guess this is a small way of us trying to reach the audience in what is happening out there. So going into Stack's stance and approach to ESG, can you just give us a little bit of an insight into the stance and the approach to ESG at Stack?
Absolutely. So one thing I will say up front is already the fact that Stack's ESG strategy and approach is very new. I spoke about that in the beginning, where that was one of the huge attraction points for me in this role, is to really shape how we move forward and take what I've learned and plug that into Stack today. So where we are right now is we have a comprehensive ESG strategy, and it's something that really carefully addresses two things, which is our material risk, but also demonstrating our corporate values. And what do I mean by that? From a material risk perspective, that's really looking at our environmental impact. So what approach are we taking to water, biodiversity, waste, energy, and carbon? So they're very specific pillars that we're working on. And this is also based on what our clients are concerned about, our investors are concerned about, and then where we have a direct impact. So we've looked at the entire spectrum there. And then when I speak about corporate values, I'm really talking about our progressive social impact stance. Now, social impact is one of our differentiators. It is what sets us apart in the industry. We see environmental as an area we have to do. There is no way around that. We need to address that. It has a tangible and direct impact to both the industry and the people around us. But the social impact piece is something that just historically has been forgotten sometimes. The S is almost silent in many industries. And so from a social impact perspective, as I said to you in the beginning, we are looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, our community engagement strategy, and then also our education strategy. There are two additional pillars that are led by different departments, and that is employee engagement as well as health and safety. But all of those are interlinked. Did mention in the beginning, but we really focused on global collaboration and local implementation. We've got businesses in the Americas, in Asia Pacific, and in EMEA with very different nuances to them, right? So they've got different regulations, different priorities as well, but we're all speaking to one another and they're making sure we can implement locally. And that's really how we're approaching our ESG strategy. I don't want to forget the G, because that's another one that often gets left off. And from that perspective, we're looking at our business ethics. We work closely with our legal team. Business ethics, risk management, and compliance really fits into our governance structure there. And it is not something that is forgotten, but they're all linked together and managed by different areas of our business.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting what you said there about the environmental side. I agree. The whole industry takes that incredibly seriously. The whole, the supply chain. It's something. Even if you wanted to get away from, you simply can't
Yes.
dismiss that. It's essential. However, what you said there about the social aspect, I think is really, really important. Now, I did see something you guys were doing with Black Bullion, I think it was, and that was a scholarship program, which I think probably is part of your education policy, possibly. I don't know. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'm very, very excited to tell you about that one, because that for us is our first ever scholarship fund that we've launched, and I'm really, really proud to be part of them. We have a great partner with Black Bullion. They're actually an ed tech firm, so they are a smaller outfit, and I think that's also part of our narrative, right? So how are we supporting smaller businesses, ed tech firms, and any other partners that we approach going forward? But Dal, just to get into the details of that one, because I'm right front and center on the scholarships piece, we have, in collaboration with Black Bullion, identified a specific target audience that we want to reach. And those are people that are from underserved communities, people that come from lower socioeconomic backgrounds for whatever reason, that want to actually study a degree in science, technology, engineering, and maths. And we're also looking at females that want to go in this realm. And that then links directly to our diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. Historically, we know that the industry is very male dominated, with minority groups that are not represented. And that's not just this industry, that is a lot of other industries as well. And one of the key things that myself and our CEO are trying to push forward is how do we access those diverse talent pools to bring them into this industry? Scholarships is one way to do it, but there are many other ways to do it as well. But we're quite proud about this one because it has a direct social mobility angle to it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It certainly does. And we talked again on previous episodes, so there's common themes that always come through these episodes. I've invested in the grassroots, if you like, so for not just people that come directly into the data center industry, but just other industries that high tech or are STEM related in some way. So how important do you think that it is for Stack, but also other businesses, to invest in grassroots schemes like these?
I think one of the things you'll notice from me is a lot of our examples are at the grassroots level, because ultimately that is where we have the impact. I go back to what I've said before, but that is where we directly impact those local communities. We need to be able to demonstrate to them not just, okay, who is Stack and what are we doing, but also what are the economic benefits that they're going to get from this activity. And that can be anything from helping with infrastructure locally. That could be fiber connectivity, recycling initiatives. One of the things that we have put out quite a lot is the heat reuse program we have in Oslo, where we're reusing that heat and working with the local district system to heat 5,000 homes in that local community. These are the things that people don't know about necessarily. They see this big black box and don't know how that is connected to their community and what we can plug back into. Some of these things are happening organically. Other times there needs to be a strategic focus on doing that. But either way, I think just creating more of that awareness at the local level is far more impactful than anything else.
Yeah, I totally agree. That again, that education piece, because I think the data center industry is one, a lot of industries out there get a lot of criticism for environmental, social impact they have. But, I think there's a lot of industries out there as well. If we just address the balance a little bit and gave the other side of the argument a little bit about how data centers do reuse energy into local townships or local villages, towns, whatever it is. Yeah, I think that's so important. How important do you think that is in terms of addressing the talent gap, which is here today, and doesn't seem like it's going to be gone tomorrow either, to be fair?
It's a massive gap, and I think companies that are not prioritizing this in their sort of strategic thinking, their vision, are going to see big issues down the line. I think we're already seeing issues. So maybe I can speak about a couple of examples of how we're trying to address that from the talent perspective, if that's helpful to create the picture. But we are really looking at our education strategy in a number of ways. There are two ways we're looking at it. There are 7 levers that we are addressing when it comes to our education strategy. A couple of them we've spoken about already, which is awareness raising. There is partnerships, and those are meaningful partnerships that we're involved in. Things like training solutions. So the Stack Academy is something I'll speak about in a moment. And then we also look at the pathways, and pathways are scholarships, internships, graduate programs, apprenticeships as well. So really a comprehensive way that we're looking at our strategy, all of it underpinned by diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're also looking at the life cycle of education. So an example that I can give there is we've tapped into the younger generation in Zurich at the grassroots level. We're working with an organization there called Go Tech Lab, and they specialize in exposing young students to robotics, engineering, sciences, but really using hands-on technology. And I mean, one of the days when you're around in Zurich, you can come and have a look at this. But it's fantastic how Martin, who's the director there, takes these young kids all the way from kindergarten or to teenage years, brings them into this lab and exposes them to these different subjects. Now, one of the key things we are doing is we're building a data center specific program. And this is something that will be launched later on in the autumn, and particularly looking at what is a data center. These kids don't know what it is. I mean, adults don't know what it is, so it's not even about the kids. But starting at that level to introduce them to these concepts, and we'll also bring them to one of our data centers for a tour. But that's at a very young age. And then when we look at the next stage, which is really around your high school age, we've got something that is pioneering in Italy, and it's called the Stack Academy. How that actually started is they started to engage with high schools in the local regions, and actually explain to these high schools that there is another pathway to your career. It doesn't necessarily end up in a formal university application, but you can actually join a training and apprenticeship program, which is something that our Italian team set up with a partner there. And it is an 18-month program where, particularly looking at the more technical skills, which is where the gap is, we are lacking in mechanical engineering, technical engineering, electrical, and that's what this training solution offers. So they're bringing in high school students into this training. They shadow Stack employees on the ground, and then it sets them up for a path of permanent employment, which I think is absolutely phenomenal and something we're going to replicate. And then, Del, I've spoken already about the scholarships, and that's the next life cycle, is just how we are enabling students to study in the areas that they want to study in, but particularly with STEM, and enabling those underserved communities to do that. But we're also going to be looking at how we reintroduce people from other industries into Stack and into the data center industry, because I don't come from this industry, and I've had the fortunate opportunity of being given that role to come into Stack and not necessarily come from the data center industry. So we're really looking at this in a comprehensive way. Again, Del, just to go back to the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece, I do want to stress the fact that that will be a foundational lens that we look at things. One of the key things that we did do most recently, and I'm very proud about this one, is we launched our very first diversity, equity, and inclusion conference. And that was in Zurich, and that was last month. We brought in expert speakers from all over the world. So these were educators, political figures, industry leaders, very diverse backgrounds. And one of the key things we wanted to do, we were being very self-reflective, and we went, our organization doesn't really understand this concept. We don't know what it means. We don't know what value it brings. I know what that means, but I mean the rest of the population. And we thought, well, this is going to be called the DEI Groundworks Conference, a bit of a play on words with construction there, but it's laying the foundation for what is DEI, how is it valuable for me, and how can we practically implement policies and infrastructure to get this going. It was an absolute success to the point that we are going to do this bigger and better next year. And it's really, really good to see that the business now is heavily engaging on bringing more people in to teach us, because this doesn't need to be something we do on our own. So we're bringing externals to help us out, and partners to help us on our journey. But again, just linking this back, it links back to our talent and education strategy. They will be intricately linked on
Yeah.
that one.
No,
Said
it
a
sounds
mouthful, Del. Go
no,
ahead.
no. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on. One
Yeah.
was the diversity and inclusion event that you recently hosted, because
Mhm.
I heard that you guys were doing that. What I didn't understand until I saw actually just pictures on LinkedIn of just the kind of the scale and just how seriously you guys took that. It was a properly it looked exceptional. It really did. Yeah, no, some of the speakers that you had and the level of participation was hugely impressive. So yeah, I didn't realize it was going to be so kind of such a big event. So congratulations on that. What you said about the education pieces in Switzerland and Italy, what I love about that is I'm a father myself, and I just think kids need to be inspired, really. I think and this is no disrespect to any engineers out there, but when you talk about engineering, if I was to talk about engineering to my sons from a data center perspective, of course they might be a little bit young, but it's hard to bring that to life. But if I took them to data centers, they understand about tech, and you explain to them what the tech was actually doing, and you could maybe link it to exciting things like gaming and all that sort of stuff. Then I'm sure that's that inspiration that I think kids need now, and that guidance in the early years of when they're starting to form about what they want to be when they're older. That's the sort of stuff that kids really need now. So I love all of that.
And Del, just to that point, we need to get a bit more creative around it, right? So
Yeah.
exactly to your point, is one thing, sort of speaking about these different career pathways, is another thing showing kids what it actually means. And I do think we have an opportunity to message this industry slightly differently, which is effectively we are the backbone of the digital world. That is what we are, and nobody makes that connection. They kind of see big infrastructure, big black box, and then don't connect it to the fact that you will not be able to have your TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever else is out there without what we do, and including essential services in the medical industry as well.
Yeah, and maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's for if you don't have that big black box, you don't get Instagram. I think that would be the route to most children's heart, I guess.
Exactly. Sadly, yes, that's actually true.
So I guess, where does the drive come from? Because I think all businesses approach these things differently, from either how serious they take them or the policies they implement. I know there's different routes and angles you can try and tackle some of the challenges, but where does the drive come from for such initiatives within Stack?
It's a very big question, but the drive definitely comes from the top, Dal. I know you've had interactions with our EMEA CEO, John Eland. You know him quite well. Very down to earth individual, and also really puts his people at the heart of everything that is being done. And that may sound very cliche, but it is the truth. Once you meet John, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I think that is the key thing, the values that are driven from your leadership team seeping into the initiatives and the work that you do at the ground level. That is the clear connection over there. So the drive is strictly coming from the top, and even beyond our CEO, but we do have investors and clients that really want to see social impact at the forefront of what we're doing, among all the other pillars within ESG. But there is a clear connection that we require people for the industry. We have people in the industry. How do we attract and retain these talented individuals? We're not going to do that by just focusing purely on the infrastructure piece. We need to focus on the human piece as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, like anything really, without sponsorship from the most senior people with any business, implementing such initiatives and getting buy-in, it's never going to work, is it? So I'm assuming that's even more so with anything surrounding ESG. It's got to come from the top, hasn't it, for it to be, work over the long term.
Absolutely. I think, being in the ESG space for such a long time, it took a long time for people to understand the business value of this. And that's another point, Del, just to raise that as well. I think as ESG professionals, are we communicating the business value in the best possible way that we can? I think it's very easy, and I fall into this trap, it's very easy for us to speak about the environmental and social value that this is bringing, but then you've got to also think about the audience that you're speaking to, and there is clear return on investment with some of these initiatives. How are we making sure that that is painted in the correct way?
Yeah, absolutely. Just on that, I'm guessing that, would it be a case that maybe it could be a taboo subject to talk about the return on investment in some ways because of the nature of ESG? Not a taboo subject, but almost, almost in some ways there is a commercial return, there is a commercial value to it, and we've got to be proud of that, right? I'm assuming.
Absolutely. I mean, again, we are dealing with businesses. We are in the space of capitalism, right? We cannot deny that. That is what we're doing as a business. And I think that's something that we need to be very comfortable with.
Yeah.
The fact that, yes, we are doing that. And these two concepts can coexist. Sustainability and business progress can coexist. And if anything else, they push each other, right? So again, I go back to the talent piece. There is a very clear return on investment when we are going into younger schools and we're teaching them about this industry so that we can attract them into it, or so that they understand that there are positive benefits to the industry itself. So I don't think we should be shying away from it. I think we actually need to get a bit more confident and articulate in bridging the two, but they are very much linked, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, that's cool. You mentioned investors kind of sponsoring from the top as well. How important are the investors' roles in, do you think, the data center world and other industries in making sure it's not, it flows down from where the money comes from, essentially?
So what we're seeing lately, Del, is there is increasing questions around our ESG strategy from investors. This is not historically something we've seen before, but now it is increasing quite a lot, both on the environmental impact side, but also on the social impact side. This is also directly linked to green loans and social impact loans. So again, there is an entire ecosystem being created to both fund the data center industry, but from an environmentally responsible perspective. So we are getting a lot of questions, which we're very happy to answer and engage in it. If anything, I'm actually glad that conversation is on the table with investors now.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then when it comes to implementing corporate ESG at the heart of corporate strategy, what challenges do you, as a professional, not necessarily within Stack, but what do you envisage ESG professionals like yourself, the challenges that they face in trying to implement ESG at the heart of a corporate strategy? Because it must be, there must be people out there that don't have the sponsorship possibly that you do, and have challenges to implement such initiatives.
Oh, that could be a long list, but we don't have all day for that one. I think, Del, one of the key things is communicating, and we've said it before, but being able to communicate and demonstrate the benefits of ESG, I think that is something that we need to get a lot stronger on. Otherwise, it does get seen as a separate part of the business that's functioning in a silo, when it really should be embedded in an entire business, right? So I think just finding ways to communicate that, getting people engaged and involved. I've spent a large portion of my role, and you'll see that, speaking about what we do. Now, it's not just speaking without backing it up with actually doing the work, but if we're not talking about this, how are people going to know? And also, how are they going to know how to get involved? So you will see I spend a significant amount of time on that stakeholder engagement piece, socialization. I don't know how many people in our business have had to look at our ESG strategy. We've got this wonderful framework that we have, and I'm pretty sure that they have seen it to death. And that's fine. And that's what we need to do. We need to be a little bit more aggressive in how we're speaking about it, getting ourselves out there. I also think there is another challenge that we need to be very mindful of, which is engaging with governments and in the political landscape, influencing how regulations are shaped. Because if governments and political figures are not aware of of how the industry works, we could have unfavorable regulations that we could have just had a conversation about. This is what it actually is. This is what we are doing. And that I think is something we need to be a bit more engaged in, just generally as ESG professionals, getting engaged in policy, in advocacy, in public affairs. So that is another area that I can think of.
Because it seems to be a profession that's evolving. I know it's not brand new, obviously, but it's certainly evolving, isn't it, as a role and as a function within businesses.
Definitely. It's getting a lot bigger, and I do think we need to find more talent in the sustainability sphere. So there's talent needed for data center industries, and that's very clear. But we also need to build capacity and talent when it comes to sustainability, because there is a future and a current state where people are overwhelmed. Suddenly, sustainability professionals need to know a bit of everything within a business, and that is quite difficult, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I've got a couple more questions before we wrap up, but the one question I just wanted to look at the next 12 months for you guys at Stack from an ESG perspective. I know you've discussed some of the initiatives, which we'll definitely put some in the show notes, certainly for some of those scholarships and some of the news articles as well, because there's some really cool things to read over there for sure. But what does the next 12 months look like for you guys at Stack?
Well, from a ESG perspective, we are now going to try and scale that strategy, right? So we do have the strategy in place, we have roadmaps in place, and we have initiatives that have started. I want to see us make sure that we scale some of those. We've made a lot of commitments from a education and diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective, so pushing that forward. We're actively recruiting in this space. So that much, as well, Del, we are trying to build that capacity so that we can actually execute on these initiatives. So I would say the next 12 months is going to be boots on the ground and pushing things forward so that you and I are not speaking about the same stuff next year this time.
Well, let's do it again next year and see that 12 months, the before and after that 12-month period, and
No
definitely hear about that diversity and inclusion event as well, which is going to be twice as big next year, do you think?
Oh goodness, Del, I'm not committing to anything right now. So I'm still getting my head around the fact that we need to make this a lot bigger. Look, it's great support from leadership and everyone that was in the room on the day, all the Stack employees. So I think it's a positive move forward. It's just making sure that we put our heads down and we get this to scale. That's it.
Was you in Cannes as well? Did you go to Cannes this year?
I did. That was my first one. Actually.
How was it?
So
how was it? First time there?
It was absolutely incredible from a networking perspective and just engaging with different industry members. It was really great. I've done a couple of these conferences now, but I felt like that had both the scale of people there and then great quality individuals that were there as well. So it was really good to just network, get to know people, understand our partners. We had a really nice Stack event that happened, and we invited our suppliers, partners, clients, and that was really, really great to do that. I also sat in on a talent and skills gap panel. So speaking on what Stack is doing from our education strategy to our social impact work. And I just think overall it was quite productive and it wasn't a bad view either. So
no, I went to Hawaii this year. I didn't go to Data Cloud. Our team went to Data Cloud, but Cannes and Hawaii, they're not the worst places to go for work conferences. I've certainly been to worse. But
no, whoever picks these, they know what they're doing.
They know what they're doing, absolutely do. Well, look, thank you so much for coming on the Data Center Exchange. I really do appreciate you lifting the lid on what you guys are doing there. And I think it's really positive to just trying to address the balance in some way. I know there's lots of other businesses out there doing some incredible things as well, but when I'd heard about what you guys were doing at Grassroots and across the entire business, I definitely want to have some time and for you to share that with us. Thank you very much, Michillay.
My absolute pleasure. And again, Dal, just thank you for inviting us as well. I mean, we'd love to get the word out more and more. And it also helps us to identify other partners that can
Yeah,
join the work that we're doing.
yeah.
So that's probably my call to action is if there are people that want to work with us on things, give me a shout.
You'll be
That's it.
you're sure to be tagged into the LinkedIn so when we put this out there. So yeah, absolutely. People connect and hopefully you can have more partnerships as a result. That would be an amazing output.
Brilliant. Thank you so
Great.
much, Dal.
Thank you very much. Take
All
care.
right. Bye.